is the most frustrating part. It's like my brain is like, the peak is there and I see these guys just getting so drained, but I can't get to the peak, right? Because I'm just like paddling. And got like washed in. And I was sitting on the beach, dude, and I was like about to throw up. And this is so embarrassing to like admit at the time. I was like, I don't think I can make it out again. And I remember going back and just feeling like I just can't surf swells anymore. And at one point I like sold all my gear and all my boards. I was like, forget it. What's the point? I tried to do bands. I tried to do like, the resistance machine, cable machine. I tried so much, but none of it like worked and none of it felt like right. Then you like explained to me that you had the basis and I was like, what are you talking about? So I started training. I remember, dude, I was like dead the first day. I could just feel that like that was the feeling the day after I would go chase a swell. Like in my muscles. I remember training twice a week. I also felt like so much confidence, like fitness confidence, because I felt like mentally, like I could handle whatever. So I was like, I'm gonna go Northshore. I remember like showing up, it's like overhead. And I remember the first wave and just getting in so early. And I just remember being like so stoked, almost like I got like freaking like a pipe tube or something, you know what I mean? But it was just like a regular wave. I got so many good waves and like, I felt like, wow, like this is it. I just need to stay in paddle shape and it's not that hard. So for like anyone who wants to, get more waves and like have more fun in the ocean, and to me, it's a no-brainer. Like you could do it at home and you do it for 10, 20 minutes a week and then you'll just be in the water, like so much more confident, like paddling circles around people. It sounds silly to say it changed my life, but like it definitely changed my life in this way and like give me like a ton of happiness for real. The fact that there's this device that's like a few $100, dude, just on that Hawaii swell would have paid like 10 times that. But like I can go handle swells and like I've gotten so many good waves and memories the past 3 years because I just use it twice a week. Like there's not really a price for that.
Hey everyone, very excited because today I'm finally going to unveil what I've been working on for the past 3 years. We're going to be talking to Ben, who got some pretty insane results from using this as well. Today's topic is paddle fitness, and this is something that surfers of all ability levels struggle with, whether you're a beginner surfer, intermediate surfer, advanced surfer, even CT level pro surfers struggle with this. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit because the thing is, at this point, I've interviewed over 50 different pros, coaches, and shapers, and there's a common thread through so many of these, which is that you gotta train your paddling. Because the hardest thing about surfing, and this is probably what makes it one of the hardest sports in the world, is you get so few reps. And one of the most powerful ways to increase the number of reps that you're gonna get is by training your paddling, right? And that's really what's gonna accelerate your progression so you can have more fun. And I was interviewing Parker Coffin, and he talked about how basically you should have called surfing paddling because that's what you spend the majority of the time that you're surfing. I was interviewing Nicole DeCoit, big wave, double XL a nominee, and he talked about how, hey, if there's a 3-hour session, you're gonna basically spend 2 hours and 55 minutes of it just paddling around and sitting. When I interviewed Zeke Lau, CT level pro surfer, incredible surfer. If you look at him, he's just completely jacked, so fit. And what's fascinating about it when I interviewed him is he talked about how even though he would train 6 hours a day, he was surfing 6 hours a day, unlimited time, unlimited resources, he would still on top of that do additional paddle training. He would go like paddle all the way to Molokai, right? Because he said paddling is huge. It's actually the edge that he wants to focus on so that he can get an edge against the competition. He called paddling the base of surfing. And, he's incredibly fit, but he was telling them about times in heats where, he'd have to battle back out to the peak, and then a perfect wave would come and his muscles would cramp up. And so that's the reason that he decided that he needed to train his paddling. And it's not just Zeke Lau that struggles with his paddle training. You'll see all sorts of pros training their paddling, right? So there's footage of Nathan Florence doing paddle training, Billy Kemper doing paddle training, Laird Hamilton doing paddle training, Kanoa Igarashi doing paddle training. So if these elite level pros who have unlimited time and resources are training paddling, what does that mean for a mere mortal, for the everyday surfer who doesn't get to train and surf as much as they would want to, right? We got busy lives, busy social schedules, busy jobs. We surf inconsistent waves, can't surf as much as we'd used to, probably out of shape. What does that mean for us? I've tried everything. So elastic resistance bands, they don't really work because they're elastic. So the resistance at the initial catch and pull phases of the stroke, which are the most important phases when you generate the majority of your power when you're paddling, there's not enough resistance, and all the resistance is at the very end, and then becomes basically a tricep workout. Not to mention, it's gonna jerk your hand all the way back during that all important recovery stroke, so you can't train your recovery stroke. It's also gonna create this really jerky technique, which isn't gonna be good for your actual surf paddling. All right, I tried swimming in the pool, okay, which is actually not very time efficient because you got to find time in your schedule. You got to find a slot in the pool. You might be paddling next to a granny, and you're not training in that arched position that you need to be training as a surfer. Okay, working out at the gym, not even close. Okay, I've tried all sorts of weird exercises. Nothing really replicates the very unique surf paddle stroke until now. All right, so after countless iterations and revisions, finally ready to share with you the Basis Surf Paddle Trainer. It utilizes consistent, smooth resistance that feels almost like water. That resistance is concentric only. So after you do the catch, the pull, and then the exit, there's actually no resistance as you're returning your hand back to the beginning. And that phase of the stroke is oftentimes a limiting factor for a lot of surfers because it stresses all those tiny little rotator cuff muscles in returning your arm back. That's what, makes it so people don't have the energy to surf anymore, where they can't lift their arms and they can't keep surfing. Okay, it's small, it's compact, it's not bulky, it's not going to take up half of your living room when you're using it. You can adjust the resistance as well from a low level endurance paddle to a higher level sprint. You can even do super intense, super heavy strength workouts on it as well. All right, so you can actually use this to build muscle on a surf trip because it's so portable. Last thing I should mention is that it works with a bunch of different setups. So you could use it, ideally use it on a bench, but you could use it with a Bosu ball. You could use it standing. You could use it kneeling on a pillow. It's super versatile, works with any setup. So you can use it at home. You can go bring it with you to the office and then work out during your lunch. You can take it with you when you travel. If you struggle with paddle training, and I know so many people do struggle with this, it is an absolute game changer. It's an absolute game changer. And so if you're interested, go to surfbasis.com. That's surfbasis.com, where you can check it out. But I feel like I've been talking about it enough. I want to give you some genuine, proper insight into how it has dramatically changed the life of an actual everyday surfer. So without further ado, here's the interview with Ben. All right, welcome to the Basis Surf Podcast. This is going to be a really interesting one because we got Ben Maloney. We're going to be getting into a ton of really good stuff, but a little secret. He was one of the original beta testers of my prototypes for the Basis trainer, and we're going to be going through his whole journey, surfing and living in Hawaii, to getting to the point where he was thinking even about quitting surfing, to going back to Hawaii and basically, even though he was pretty much landlocked, charging, pretty proper waves over there. So we're going to go through that whole journey. And what I think is going to be really cool, though, is Ben is, I feel like so many people are going to be able to relate to Ben's story. And I know, before this, we were chatting about stuff that we want to get into, but Ben is like a highly analytical, smart dude, and he has tons of tips that I think are going to be helpful for everybody. So there's going to be golden nuggets throughout the whole thing. And it's obviously super cool to get tips from, the best surfers in the world, the best coaches and the best shapers, which is part of the fun of listening to the Basis Surf podcast. But, honestly, when it comes to a lot of disciplines, some of the best advice I've ever gotten is from people that are just a couple steps past me, because they were in my shoes not too long ago, and they remember all the little nuances and the little things that they had to struggle with. Whereas somebody that's 10,000 steps ahead of you, in their journey, they can barely remember what they can barely remember what you were, where you are stuck. And so I think it is really useful and helpful to get advice from people that are just a couple steps past you. I mean, Ben has been surfing for, I think, what, 17 years now, but he's not Kelly Slater, but Ben is a really great guy. Very stoked to have him. Welcome to the podcast, Ben.
Yeah, man, I'm super stoked. And like, I've been kind of with you like on the sidelines of this journey in the peanut gallery, kind of watching of you starting the pod, kind of building your community and doing all this stuff. So I'm super stoked to like contribute and just see what all the stuff you've done. It's kind of crazy when you're like we're discussing an idea at like a surf break or something. And now you're like interviewing like big time people, present company excluded. You know what I mean? Like it's awesome. So congrats on that.
Yeah, it's been kind of a wild journey, right? I mean, I've been working at this thing for 3 years now, and you've been there the entire way, giving me feedback on, on the trainer and all that. And yeah, so this is so first of all, thank you for all that support. Like, I really appreciate it. I don't, I couldn't have got here without you. So I really appreciate all that feedback. You've helped, refine the product and get it to where it's at, where I think it's really going to help people a ton. But why don't we dive into your story now, right? So why don't we start in Hawaii? Like, how did you end up there? What was it like living there? Why don't we just start there?
Sure. So I'm like a Boston kid, like not was not a great surfer, like surfed a bit. Caught my first wave when I was like 20 up in New Hampshire. And so like I had the bug, but wasn't like very good. And I moved out to Hawaii kind of randomly because I'm like, dude, seems sick out there, and like I just want to get after it and get into a place. I don't really know anyone and see what happens. And so I move out there, and I end up falling in with like pretty rad groups of people, living in kind of like what I would consider probably a surf frat house, where I'm like the Howley adoptee little brother, pretty much. And it's just like all these guys, and some of the guys like worked for Red Bull, and you'd have all these pro guys over, and it was kind of like wild for me. But on top of that, they're all like watermen. They're like, they're from like various places, some of them from Oahu, North Shore, or like Big Island, and they all like rip. They're like bodyboarders, surfers, like divers, like outriggers. So I'm there and I'm like, maybe can catch some waves, but like not good. And like moving in with them and like being out there, you're kind of like, to use a jujitsu analogy, you're like maybe a blue belt, like you just got your blue belt, and then you like get dropped into a land and it's all black belts. Like the conditions are black belts. There's black belts everywhere. Like little 8-year-old girls are just, it's like Carissa Moore and little 8-year-old girls at Kewalos, just like, and you're like, dude, this is like heavy. And so for me, it was like rad because you have like so much variety of waves and for like variety of conditions. You can like, for me, I could progress and get competent, but like not without taking some beatings.
Right. Well, being around a bunch of black belts, they're probably going to push you into black belt conditions, right? But then you're also going to learn black belt things because you're constantly rolling with black belts. So tell me, what was that all like? I mean, were you just like
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like it's yeah. I mean, in over my head for sure, dude. I can remember like sessions where they would take me out. And like, dude, also I went through so many years of like bad board choice and like, ego stuff and like all this stuff where like I should have been riding way different equipment or whatever. But like, dude, I can remember sessions being out there like, I don't know, probably double overhead, something like that, and just not even catching a wave, like just like surviving, like for some sessions. And I think like what it did though is it like desensitized me to like a lot of conditions. Now, like you should be careful and like you should be in shape and like you shouldn't just like go charge like really gnarly things out of the gate. But like I could swim, I could like do those other things, and them bringing me out, it really did like desensitize me to larger conditions. So then when it became to like kind of average conditions or whatever, I could kind of get out there. And I also learned like with them how to navigate a pack too, because there's like a lot of stuff going on out there, a lot of dynamics where it's like, cool, there's a lot of waves, dude, but there's a lot of good surfers, and the best surfers get the best waves. That's kind of gravity, to be honest with you. That's like a law of the ocean, in my opinion. So for me, it was like I was taking a lot of scraps. I was taking like inside or like late drops or like closeouts or whatever. And I'd also have to get out in the ocean like when no one else was there. Like it's windy, it's onshore, it's small, it's like dark. It's like I'm paddling out at dark, going to the crappier spot. Not at the peak. I'm like down a bit from all the boys. So it's like I'd go out them and you'd be at these premier South Shore and North Shore spots. and it'd be hard for me to get waves. And then I'd be out on my own, like in the mornings. And for me, man, like I had like, cause of my background or whatever, like I think I had like a weird mentality where I was just like so determined to get
Hmm.
better. And for me, that just meant like, I'm just going to be
What
in
do
the
you think
water
that
like all
was?
the time.
What do you think that was? You said
So
your
I think like
background.
I grew up wrestling and stuff. Yeah, I just grew up like wrestling, and I think I wasn't like that good, but I grew up with a lot of like really good people, like kids that won national championships. Around a lot of really really good coaches and stuff. So when I was like a kid, I like learned to train. That's like what I knew. So like I knew that you go and you like work really really hard. You find people. You basically find a system, and then you learn that system, and then you like work really really hard, and then you like get better, right? And I'd done that for like a decade through like grappling and wrestling, and so I knew that like, okay, so this surfing thing, like I've caught some waves, but like there's got to be like there's got to be like a way to break this down, right? Like I can't just go flop around in the ocean and like get better. You know what I mean? Like how do I think about this? And for me, I thought about it like, all right, there's like mechanics. So there's like a pop up or like on wave performance or like paddling. There's like general fitness, duck dives, like things like that. So there's like that camp of things. And then there's like kind of reading the ocean, maybe is like the other big camp. And so I felt like for the fitness stuff, if I could just like get out there all the time, take beatings, and like paddle a lot and like do all that, I'd like get the fitness part down. And I could do some land stuff, and I was like staying in shape. But I felt like, all right, that stuff will kind of take care of itself. But then for like the wave reading, I was like, well, there's no like, I don't think there's any shortcuts there. Like I just had to spend a lot of time in the ocean, and because I felt like I was like late because I was in my like early 20s and all these guys were like ripping and everyone was so good. I didn't grow up surfing. I felt like, how do I like make up that progress more quickly? Because I felt like if I have to do this at a normal pace, I'm not going to be able to like hang with these guys or like get waves. So for me, I just I did like a lot of body surfing too. Like we go out to Sandies or something on Oahu, and I would just use that time to read waves because you can get a lot more waves like body surfing than I could surfing.
Hmm.
So I just like spent a lot of time, and it might sound like kooky, I don't know, but like for me, it was like I took it like that. I took it like I need to find a system to progress. Because if I just go like paddle out with these dudes every, like 3, 4 times a week at these really good breaks, like I don't feel like I'm going to get better.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, and first of all, you saying that, just body surfing is kooky. I mean, I just interviewed Todd Glazer, who's Kelly Slater's, surf photographer, and he's a really good surfer in his own right. He even has a surfboard named after him by Rob Machado. But I asked him, what his favorite board was, or what board would he keep? Like if he was on a desert island, he was like desert island. He's like, I would actually just like have fins and go body surfing. Like that was one of them. So, and I find that to be a very interesting kind of hack to up your wave knowledge is because there's two things that you mentioned actually, right? One of them is body surfing. I haven't spent a ton of time doing it. I mean, I just play around the shore break, but I totally get it. It's like the hard thing that I think a lot of surfers don't know how to like beginner surfers don't know how to do is like knowing when they've actually caught the wave. And like when you're relying just on your body, you're really going to have to dial that in. That just becomes naturally. But then the other thing is, you talked about surfing non-premier spots, surfing off hours, surfing when conditions aren't good, all of those things. And that I think that's a incredibly underrated strategy. I don't think a lot of people do enough, right? You always see like beginners and and it makes sense because they're like, well, there's a bunch of people there, so that means that's probably where I should go surf, but that's also probably where it's going to be the most competitive. Sure, the waves are the best there, but you're competing with, if John Florence is out there, you're basically competing with Michael Jordan for waves. Like you're not you're not going to get any waves. You don't want to go play basketball where like the NBA players are. You want to go play basketball at the spot down the block where it's empty and you're just going to have your own things. It's not going to be as good, but like you're probably going to get better reps in, and I think that wrestling analogy is super interesting, right? Because like, well, you talked about having to develop that ability to read the ocean, and it's similar to any grappling, right? Like if it takes time for you to develop like that sense, okay, someone's going to shoot on me and try to take me down, and what angle they're going to go at, right? And like when you're sparring with somebody, you're rolling with somebody that's a black belt, like they're going to be so fast that they're just going to slip you every time. But if it's if you're sparring another white belt or a blue belt, like you're going to have time to process and it's going to make sense. So I think that those are really invaluable tips that you gave there. So was there anything that you learned though from surfing with these other black belt surfers? I mean, obviously they were pushing you into these more gnarly situations, but was there what were things that you were able to extract from just being around like such high end surfers?
I think like one of the really good advice I got to dovetail what you just said, and I don't think I followed it enough, even though I talked about going to less premier spots and getting wave count. But like they would always tell me like Benny, you got to get waves, like more waves. Like it's all about wave count. And what they're kind of telling me is like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be riding like a 5'8", 5'9", or this like 5'10" Decoro. That's all you ride, like all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that's kind of what they were saying about being nice about it, was basically like, because we had another friend. I remember that this Hawaiian guy, and he was like a good bodyboarder, but he was getting into surfing around the same time, and like we were kind of progressing. And he used to ride a wave storm all the time. And there's a wave out at Sandy's. It's a surfable wave. It's a left, and I used to see him get super barreled on a wave storm,
Hmm.
and we were like kind of the same ability at that time. And then like basically all my friends were kind of telling me like that's kind of what, like, not that I had to be on an 8.0 wave storm, even though I've had like time of my life on one, but kind of like you should pick the equipment too that like will get you the most waves, and then the spots that you can get the most waves. So I think that's like, you need wave count, and it doesn't matter if you're, dude, honestly, go catch that thing on your stomach. Like I think like an East Coast hack, to be honest with you, is basically like, I know we're switching gears, I'll switch back, but like East Coast hack is show up at Rockaway. Rockaway is super busy all the time and it's crazy. Okay. So go surf Rockaway at the flag beach or whatever that you can surf at. And there's going to be a bunch of people, and then do that. And then go down to the spot where you can only swim and throw fins on and body surf for like 2 hours, or when the lifeguards show up, or surf before and then when the lifeguards show up. And I think that way you're just getting more reps. So like, I think that was one thing, was like get more waves and get as many waves as you can. And I did ride like bigger boards sometimes, or I'd go out to like a longboard spot or whatever. That's a big piece. And then the second piece I think was, I saw like how paddling was so important. Like, and I'm not just saying that because we're on like a paddle kind of kick here, but like I saw one of my buddies, Dick. He was short. He's like my size, right? I'm like 5'5". He's maybe like 5'6". He's probably one of the best paddlers I've ever seen. And I can remember days being out on like the east side of Hawaii where there's like so much current, like super gnarly, getting like sucked to Kauai. And like he's the only one catching waves out of all of us, because he can like be in the spot. And he did a lot of paddling, like canoeing. And so I felt like, oh, that's like a different thing I didn't realize. Like I always kind of felt like, oh, you got to have Kelly Slater hands. You got to be
Hmm.
John John's height. You know what I mean? Like I always had this excuse of like, oh, I'm like kind of shorter. I might never be a great paddler. I might, you know what I mean? And then I'd meet these guys like Dick, who's just like, an HVAC dude that rips. Or like I'd see these guys that were like pro guys that we'd meet or whatever, and they were like my size. And I'd be like, oh, these guys are like charging Waimea. And these guys are like, really good paddlers. And so it's not okay. So that like advanced my thinking about the technique and like fitness, because I'm like, okay, well, if they can paddle as well as a lot of these other guys without these natural gifts, then there's something going on there, right? There's like conditioning, there's technique. So then I kind of tried to understand like, what is that then? Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, what are they doing that I'm not doing?
Right.
And there was like a lot of technique to it, obviously.
Yeah. So yeah, what if you could provide a little bit more insight into that? Like what kind of, from a conditioning standpoint, what do you think they were doing? And from a technique standpoint, was there anything you were able to extract from it?
So I think like I got like advice, and I don't necessarily do this, but like even simple stuff when you're beginning, like do you know you're supposed to keep your feet together? Like, okay, but that can be hard, right? If you don't have core strength. So you need to develop like core strength. And then like you can kind of like flex your butt a little too when you're putting your feet together. So you're kind of getting that arch in the back, right? So like for newer surfers, like you see good paddlers and they're kind of like arched, right? And it can feel, and there's like a lot of muscles working there beyond like your back and your shoulders and stuff. And so I think like understanding that there was a whole kind of fitness thing there around like core and other strength. And for me, like I had that because I was like coaching wrestling out in Hawaii too. So I was like always working out in like good shape. But there was just a lot of stuff there that I felt like, hey, if you don't have those adjustments, like if I felt like I didn't have that kind of core strength or my technique on arching wasn't right, then like all the paddling was like wasted. And I wasted so many hours. And I could see like, because dude, it's pretty obvious when there's like a 10-foot set coming and everybody's paddling for the horizon and I'm freaking so slow, dude. I'm like the slowest one. I'm just like a house on my head. And like you could see like, well, like there's an efficiency there. And then it took me a long time to realize this. And I've realized it a lot more with the trainer, to be honest, but like breathing.
Mhm.
Because when you're, even if you're a good paddler, even if you surf a bunch and like you know how to paddle, when in different conditions, especially like East Coast winter or like big Hawaii or something, like when you're out in the water, you're not really like, for me, I'm not like thinking about breathing. And it can't be something you think about. So that was like, I think breath work was something that like I didn't get till later. I wish I had known that before, like diaphragmatic breathing, like figuring out ways to do that in the ocean, like with my paddling, with my workouts, which I had done in grappling. That was like a huge unlock for me, dude. That's been a huge winter unlock for me, honestly, when like Jersey's big.
Fascinating. And you got that from because you're practicing on the basis trainer. And, it's interesting that you kind of had that, revelation doing it on the basis trainer because I actually talk about it. I'm going to be releasing a paddle technique course that comes along with the trainer. But like that, your points about like getting into that arch position, and engaging your core and your glutes and your entire posterior chain in order to maintain that position is absolutely key. And you were lucky enough that you naturally had that fitness as a wrestler, but there's a lot of people that totally lack that core fitness. And it's like this, it's a thing that you actually have to train, and it's so important to train it because if you don't, that's what gets you, your shoulders into this anterior tilt, which can lead to all sorts of injuries. And so that causes all these, this ripple of bad things that could potentially happen. But the tricky thing actually is because you're engaging your core, you're like engaging, tensing your entire body, but it can be really hard to practice, like to breathe. Like people forget to breathe because they have to engage their core. And then especially when you're surfing as well, you got a million things going on, right? You got like waves, you got people, you got like your all that stuff is going on. And then you could just totally forget to breathe. And then you're just gassed like before you even get going, right? But that's actually why I think like training your technique on the basis trainer can be so useful because you've removed all the distractions that occur in the water, and then it also allows you to relax so you can focus on your breathing, which is actually something I talk about when you're paddling. And then that obviously is going to oxygenate you, you're going to have more energy, all of those things. So it's really interesting that you had that because I just like threw you on and I was like, have at it and let's see how you go. But it's interesting that you came to that experience yourself.
Yeah, I think too, like another thing, because like we can go back to Hawaii, but like for like the training, I also have thought a lot about this, like chasing swells, chasing like snowboarding and like all these things. Like why do we really like do it? Not to get like real woo woo, but like there's a lot of flow there, and people have different definitions of flow. Like Rise of Superman's a really cool book about flow state. But like to me, flow state is like a real emptiness of like mind. And I think if you ask people like, hey, why do you like love the ocean? And like a lot of them, you'll hear that answer like, dude, I'm out there, I don't think about anything, I'm just kind of, I think that's flow. And I think you get that from being in like large, like the ocean or the mountains. And it's interesting because like I hadn't put it together till I started on the basis, but you can get, but I do think I get a lot of flow from exercise in a way. And
Mm.
on the paddle, especially, man, like you're going 10, even 10, 15 minutes because it's so kind of routine, right? You're just kind of like paddling. You're not doing anything and you're not in the ocean. You're not going anywhere. At some point, you like your brain sort of shuts off and you enter like a mini flow for real. And when
Mm.
you're in that mini flow, you're like really focused on the technique of it. I feel for
Yeah.
me, and there's actually something kind of like rewarding just in that I found. But it's kind of like a
Mm.
weird. I don't know if that's like a rando thing to share, but like it's kind of like
Yeah.
a fun little thing where I realized, oh, there's flow in like the paddle, not just in the ride.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I know what you're talking about. I never really thought about it as flow. but you definitely do get into a rhythm. It's kind of like you get into like a runner's high, you know, similar kind of thing. You just get into the zone. Yeah, no, but I think I know what you're talking about. Interesting. Okay. That I'm glad to hear that it was like a more meditative experience and it wasn't just excruciating, because I could also see people just being like, oh man, this is hard, because it can be hard as well, you know.
But but it like honestly, like, and that's another thing. That's another thing from like grappling is like what I realize is like when you compete a lot or whatever, like your practice should be way harder than you're competing. And
Yeah,
like I think when I was in Hawaii and I'm like out in the ocean every day, like almost every day, like you don't need as much land training. I think you need the basics. So like as you get older, there's stuff you got to do out of the water for sure. But like that age in my 20s, I could just like, eat pizza like as I paddle, right? Kind of like
right,
whatever. But like, yeah, so I think like that, like when you're there and you're like paddling all the time, you're like whatever. But like, when that changes, or if like your schedule changes or whatever, like it becomes a lot harder for me. Now it's over a decade later. Like, dude, it's hard to like go jump on a swell, without
right,
like having that prep. And that's the funny thing is like I think surfing's like unique in that like it's not a sport like everyone sees people train. Like the pros have like almost just started training this generation. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like,
yeah,
so it's like one of those sports where like when you come into it, and I came into it, and you have all these guys that already rip because they just grew up in the ocean, and that's for a lot of people, like whether it's in Jersey or like California, it's like those guys just grew up in the ocean like surfing. They're like, how did I get good at surfing? I surfed. So when you're coming in as like more an adult or like young adult learner, whatever, it's like it's not talked about training. Dude, when I began, dude, bro, I put tape on my floor to practice pop-ups and my foot positioning. Of course, I
mm,
didn't tell anyone I did that because that felt
right,
so kooky, right? Felt
right,
so kooky to do that. But then in my head, I was like, well, if I can get 100 pop-ups here, like how long would it take me to get 100 pop-ups in the ocean? Like a really long time. And then I'm gonna blow a wave, or like it's so hard for me to get in the position and get my time out there to like get a wave. So I used to just do the pop-ups, and that's how like I began. So for me, I always felt like it I would we didn't talk about it, no one talks about it, but I felt like, oh, it would be dumb not to like do whatever I can, so that when I want to go have fun, I can have more fun. Like I don't know why you wouldn't do that.
right. Well, it's interesting, and I totally agree, right? Like you look at any other sport. I mean, you were a wrestler, right? I think you do jujitsu. Like you're gonna drill that move over and over and over again. Like I also wrestled. I also did martial arts, so there was totally this a similar connection to me. I was like, well, you want to practice on land, right? Like you don't want to like show up to a fight and that's the first time you're throwing a punch. That's not going to work, right? You got to drill that punch. So when someone's coming at you, like you got the reflexes and you know what's going to happen. So yeah, I totally hear you that it seems like a no brainer, but you know, the culture of surfing back then was everybody wanted to just pretend like they're just naturally born this way. Right.
Totally.
And some of them were like, you know, you look at Tom Curran or whatever, like he's just a savant and that's the way he surfs. But like, what's interesting, I will say is, you know, I've interviewed, you know, over 50 pros, shapers, you know, coaches at this point, and there's a mixture of people. Some people are really like those kind of just savant like artists, like, you know, Victor Bernardo, Margot Margs. Like when you talk to those guys, their approach is not very technical, but I think that they just have this and they're the gifted ones, right? They just have this intuitive way of just picking things up, and they probably have this incredible like kinetic way of learning, just very visceral. So they don't really articulate things. They're obviously extremely intelligent physically, but they're not super analytical. But then you know, I talked to like Parker Coffin and a lot of other pros, a ton of other pros, and the coaches especially, and they're all super technical. They're analyzing every single little detail, because it gives them an edge. And I think the old paradigm and old culture of surfing was that, oh, everybody's just like pretends like we're just naturally like that. But I think more and more everybody's like, no, we're breaking everything down. I was talking to Zeke Lau and he's like, dude, like, you know, me and Griff are like nerding out, like what angle do I hold my arm so that I'm like Andy Irons? You know what I'm saying? Like that's the level that even pros are getting to. But they would just pretend like, oh yeah, they're chill about it, even though on the inside they're like hyper competitive, frothing and super analytical, the way, we're going to be, we are about the things that we're focused on, right? And obviously, it translates all the way to the highest scales. So why don't we kind of shift a little bit forward in the journey now? So you moved to the East Coast. Like what? How did it feel? What was that? Where were you in your surfing journey after you had moved to the East Coast? Like, was that a big shock? I mean, I know the answer to this, but like, like what? How did your surfing change when you moved to the East Coast?
Yeah, I'd spent like almost maybe 5 years, a little under 5 years in Hawaii. Like I think progressing and like getting competent in like waves, like real waves, and so I felt like decent. Like I could ride variety of boards, and I grew up on the East Coast, and I'd come visit here, and I'd stay like how we know each other. Like I'd stay with Keola and stuff in Brooklyn, and I'd go surf like Rockaway. So I had like a sense of like, oh, all right, like New York has these type of waves, and like during hurricanes and winter, it can get like world class, but for me, even like, even though like I caught a couple waves like growing up, mostly a lot of my experience was out in Hawaii and it wasn't beach breaks. And so even just moving back actually to a beach break was a little bit of was different actually, to be honest. Like I think the time to pop up and like just these little kind of adjustments I felt like, which might sound like kind of kooky to say because like I could like ride waves, but then I came here and I was like, oh, this like I have less time to set up. Like there's these different things on like a more hollow beach break. And then like East Coast is like, yeah, it's good for like 2 hours, like one morning in February, it's like these little windows. And it's like, it's kind of like this, it's really rad, dude. I think like snowboarding and surfing on the East Coast are really precious because I think we get way more stoked than a lot of people because our conditions are so rare. And like when it happens and things line up, you're basically like it's like gold, right? And then but most of the time, if you looked at a chart, I looked at a chart once and I was trying to look it up for this podcast, couldn't figure out where I found it. What are the days over chest high clean? How many days like a year do we get? And it's some like really low percentage of days actually like clean, green, over chest high. And so like when I saw that just analytically moving back, I was like, okay, so you know, I just got to get really comfortable in like average days and just like have fun in the ocean. So it was like a mental adjustment first to just be like, hey, I'm just going to go have fun. But then also like I surfed a lot less and I started like, and the waves are like less juicy, so to speak. So like I felt like, oh, I'm bringing the same boards I would ride in a high performance wave, but there's rarely high performance waves here. And I'm also not really a high performance surfer. So like there was a lot of years where I was juggling like what board do I ride, and there's a lot of ego involved, and I was like taking out 5.5s on waist high rockaway and like not having fun, like totally not having fun, to be really honest with you, like super bummed, not getting that many waves, a lot of people getting waves around me and just feeling like super frustrated and then being like, why am I like surfing to be frustrated? So that was like kind of like part of the journey. There's like a frustration, there's like an equipment thing, there's like conditions, there's like winter. So that was it like in the beginning where I was like, all right, well, it's an adjustment and I'll surf when I can. But then surfing much more infrequently was also kind of difficult too, because when those days turn on too, like you got to be on and your fitness has to be on, especially like big, like Jersey, big days. Like people may not know watching this, but like Jersey's heavy, dude. And Jersey's like heavy during winter and that current is not friendly. And so like I felt like a little bit like I was like I don't know how to stay in shape. I don't know what board to ride. I don't know when to go surf. Like that's kind of was my journey the first few years, to be honest.
Yeah. Was there a turning point? Was there ever like a low point that you hit? I mean, I could see like, this could be a very frustrating path, like was there any, yeah, tell me about that.
I think like I'd moved upstate, so I wasn't in the city anymore. And so I was like upstairs, like a couple hours from the beach. So I'd like go do strike missions because I'm like, I'm not going to drive down. It's like 2 foot. So I'll do strike missions. And like I'd been surfing that hurricane season. I felt like, okay, I think I was riding like some short board, some 5'11, 5'10. And then like it was like October 2017. So maybe like 7 years ago. I remember this so well. Like you could call it the Kelly Slater swell in Jersey, right? So like the day that Kelly Slater went out, people can go look up videos. So like I remember I showed up to the beach dark, right? The first light comes up and it's just like all time. It's like the days like we just wait for all year. And it was like rare. It's like late October. And that morning was like spitting tubes, spitting tubes in Jersey, like not maxing, but like holding, And like I remember I showed up at the beach, dude. I'm alone. There's no one at the beach. And I like had my hands up. Like I just won like the World Cup. You know what I mean? Like, that feeling. Cause you're just like,
Yeah.
what, dude, this is so sick. And I remember it was like a new spot and like a new spot for me because I was like checking spots and I was like, oh, I think I can punch out in the middle. And I tried to punch out in the middle and I was like, kept getting washed in. And I was like, dude, I can't even freaking make it out. So it was like 15 minutes. I get washed in and then I kind of like go to the jetty and I like make it out. But by the time I make it out, I'm like super tired, right? Because I like wasn't that in shape anymore. And then there's like two other guys out. And I just the current's like ripping, like Jersey style. And like in my brain, I know where to be. So this is the most frustrating part. It's like my brain is like, dude, the peak is there. And I see these guys just getting so drained.
Mm.
But I can't get to the peak, right? Because I'm just like paddling, paddling, paddling. So this is happening for like 15, 20 minutes. And I'm getting like pretty tired. And I remember I dropped in on one, like close out, and then got like washed in because it was kind of big. And then kind of like finally made it out after a lot of effort. I got like one more and I was in and I was sitting on the beach, dude. And I was like about to throw up. Felt like first day of wrestling practice or something. And I was like ready to throw up. And I was like, bro, I can't this is so embarrassing to like admit at the time. I was like, I don't think I can make it out again. Right. I don't know if that was like an hour session or hour and a half and like barely got two waves and like didn't get the waves I wanted. And I was just watching just two guys out, just like spitting like all the way, almost like halfway across jetty to jetty. And just like guys getting so much tube time, like where I was just counting Mississippi's. And like it felt like, and I was like so defeated because I was like, I feel like I've been surfing for long enough that like I can handle a day like this and like I know where to be and like I like deserve to be in that. Like it sounds weird. I deserve to be in that tube. Like I put in so much time in the ocean. Like I want one of those like that I'll remember forever. And I didn't get it that day. And I remember going back and just feeling like I just can't surf swells anymore. Okay, so like I can't. Okay, two things need to change. I was like, number one, I can't chase big swells. And number two, I need to change my board. I can't ride short boards anymore. So that was like the start of like a few years until like probably we connected where like I was trying every friggin' board possible to make up for lack of fitness. And I was trying every fitness thing possible because I was like, well, dude, I'm actually in shape. Like I'm doing kettlebell stuff. Like I'm in shape to take beatings, but I'm not in paddle shape. And I tried to like air paddle. I tried to do bands, dude. I tried to do like, the resistance machine, cable machine. I tried so much, but none of it like worked and none of it felt like right. And then it mimicked it. So I went through like years of this and I would, and I was still riding waves and like getting okay waves, but like less and less. And at one point, dude, I like sold all my gear and all my boards. Like when I was upstate and I moved to another place. Yeah. I sold all my suits. I sold my suits. I sold my booties. I sold my gloves. I sold like I had probably a 4 or 5 board quiver. I just sold it. And I was like, forget it. I'll just like snowboard. I'll just mountain bike and snowboard. Cause like, what's the point, dude? I can't drive down. I can't go do a strike mission. I'm going to drive 2 hours to Jersey. It's going to be good. And I can't handle it when it's good. And I can't ride a board that can handle it when it's good. And then I'm not going to freaking keep driving. I'm not going to drive 2 hours to surf a 1 foot soft top, or like whatever, like a chest high day. And so what am I doing, dude? I'll just go focus on something else. Like it led to that frustration. And then it was super interesting, but and then like I would come back to it because I'd be like, no, I really want to surf. I like buy new gear, new quiver. And I couldn't figure it out. It's like this freaking Goldilocks thing, dude. And then I remember like meeting you at some point at like Makana's house. And then at some point we like chased the swell. And then you were talking about like training. And I was like, whoa, like, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I was like, oh, someone else is actually talking about the fact that we're getting old and we don't get great waves and like we need to stay in shape. And you mentioned something and then I was mentioning like some of the frustrations I was like, dude, I tried bands, I tried all this. And you're like, no, that doesn't do the recovery stroke. Oh no, that doesn't get the resistance. And I was like, dude, exactly. I couldn't voice it, but I was like, dude, exactly. It doesn't. And you're like, but I have something that does. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? You have something that does. And then you like explained to me that you had the basis. And I was like, what are you talking about, bro? Like I just couldn't even believe that someone had like figured this out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it was funny. It was just like how it all came together. I mean, like I was looking, obviously I was working on developing it and figuring out the prototypes and all that. And then you were like, and I needed somebody that would give me feedback and, because we were fine tuning a bunch of things and validating and all that. And then I was like, well, Ben, it seems like he needs it, like you of all people. I'm like, I want somebody that's like desperate, like, but also knows what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you actually are, you know what paddling is, you know how to paddle, you know how to surf and all those things. So I was like, oh, you know what, this is actually perfect. So I decided to give you one and we did a little experiment with it. Obviously, the actual device has changed a lot since the version that you tried, but you know, I don't even, it's been like 3 years since we did that little experiment, right? That's how long I've been like iterating on this thing. But why don't you tell us, like, so I got you the prototype, and then I got you set up and you started training on it. So like, just walk me through what was that like the first time you tried it, if you can remember it, and I know that it kind of peaked. I remember we both ended up being in Hawaii at the same time, surfing some pretty fun swell. Like, let's start at the beginning though. Like, what was it like? How skeptical, first of all, were you when I first told you, hey, I have something that's going to train paddling? Were you like, like, yeah,
I mean,
maybe
dude,
there's
I was
something,
so
but you're like,
desperate. I was like
uh-huh.
so desperate at that point, bro. You could have got me to like eat some weird candy or something. Like, I don't know, dude. I would have eaten a flower from the desert probably at that point because like I really wanted surfing to be in my life, but I was at a point where like my wife was pregnant at that point. I lived upstate, and I was like, so do I just like not get to surf anymore? Is that like what happens? Like you just if you don't live next to the ocean, like you don't get to have surfing in your life anymore, and like you develop like almost 2 decades of knowledge around the ocean and surfing, and but like then your fitness isn't there, so like you don't get to enjoy the ocean anymore. Like, is this what happens? Is kind of like a weird bummy experience. So when you said you had something, I was like, all right, cool. We're gonna do a baby moon out on North Shore, and like let me kind of try this thing to like just get in shape for East Coast, and then also see how it handles. Because like I was like pretty intimidated, gonna go back to like I hadn't been to Hawaii at that point in like a couple years, and when I went back the last time, I didn't even surf North Shore because it wasn't the season. So I was like, I'm gonna go North Shore, like I don't want to go there and have that Kelly swell experience where I'm just looking out at people getting great waves and don't have fitness. I was like, I can't like accept that. Like I can't do it. So when you gave it to me, you gave me a lot of tips too, because I was like, I didn't know how to train this, right? It's like, how long do I paddle for? Do I need to do like sprint paddling? Do I need to train both endurance and like fast and slow twitch, right? Meaning like, do I need to train like slow paddling and also like when you're actually paddling for a wave? And you were like, give me a lot of tips. You're like, well, based on my experience, like paddling for a wave is different and like you want to do high elbow catch. So you gave me like all these things, gave me the Tabata workout for like 15 on, 15 off and like all these things. So I just basically did everything you said. Cause again, I came from like a grappling background. I was like, dude, somebody's figured this out. Like if you do exactly what your coach says, like you get better. So I was like, all right, I'll just do like all that. And I think maybe like I ramped it. So I was training like once a week and then going to two. But I remember the first time I got on it, and like we just did it at home. I think that's the cool part about it is like if you have a door frame or like you just buy a collapsible bench or you got a good coffee table. Like I was paddling on my like wood coffee table, so I started training. I remember, dude, I was like dead the first day. I remember like I don't know if I did it 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but like I think I trained like the fast and then the slow later, and I was like, oh my gosh, bro, and I could just feel that like that was the feeling the day after I would go chase a swell like in my muscles. And I was like, oh, this is great. Cause like if I can get that lactic stuff going and I can like figure this out, then I'm gonna get over the hump. I remember training and I just was like super diligent about it, like training twice a week or whatever it was, and then ramping up to the trip. And then like going to the trip, I also felt like so much confidence, bro. Like fitness confidence. Cause I felt like mentally like I could handle whatever. And there's a lot of things that like on a North Shore swell beyond just paddling, but I felt like, oh, I'd like been there and different things. And I remember getting there and we stayed at this place, like I won't say where, but I'd never been to that part of North Shore. There was a couple of surf breaks right in front of the house, and like it's not easy to access. And I remember like showing up at the house and like looking out, and there's like these two surf breaks with like almost no one out, and it's like overhead. And I was like, oh, so sick. And what also worked on that swell was I had finally like been riding the right boards, and I had rented a 6'8", like great recommendation by you for the Arakawa. Holy moly! So I had like a smaller board too, but I didn't even end up using it much that trip. So, and I used a smaller board like once at the beach breaks, but so I had like the right board. I was super in shape. And so I remember like paddling out, and it takes a little adjustment, right? Because it's like, it's serious out there and it's hard to like explain, but there's like a lot of juice. And I remember like getting the first wave and just getting in so early and just having this like long wall. And I just remember being like so stoked. And then some uncle being out there too. And then me just being like almost like I got like freaking like a pipe tube or something. You know what I mean? But it was just like a regular wave. And like, I remember the uncle being like, yeah, like throwing me double shotguns just cause like these good vibes. And I just was like, damn, man, that's like such a good feeling. Like that's
Mm.
such a good feeling to get in at the right time of the wave, to like have the wave, to like, like that's like that. And like, I hadn't had that feeling on like a big wave in a long time. Cause even though we chased hurricanes and other stuff, I felt like I hadn't had it. And then that whole week that I was there was like just good swell. And I got so many good waves. And like, I felt like, wow, like this is it. Like, if I can just, I don't need to get in shape anymore. Like, I just need to stay in paddle shape. And it's not that hard. And so, like, if I can just stay in paddle shape, like all this other stuff I know how to do, like, will never go away. So that was like the first thing, that trip, like, totally, like, I was like, this is like so rad. And I remember like we met out at that spot, and like, I think it was pretty decent size, right? It wasn't like
Yeah.
huge,
No, that
huge, but
was
like
like,
good size, fun
no,
waves. And
there's
so
some, yeah.
I remember being so
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, that was what was trippy, because I remember when we, first started talking about this and you told me, you're like, yeah, I thought about quitting surfing. I was like, damn, like and that just made me really sad. I was like, damn,
yeah.
that's kind of heavy to like let go of something that you'd invested like all this time, like so many memories. And then like the thought of like giving up so many future memories. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're a surfer, like you look forward to this life of like, oh, like there, oh, what am I going to get to score next year? Or, like there's always that sense of adventure and being like, oh, that part of my life is like gone, I was like, oh damn, this is such a bummer. And then I remember that one day we surfed, and that was a proper day. I mean, there's some, there's definitely some double overhead waves out there, and just seeing the look on your face, you know what I'm saying? Like, just there was that contrast of seeing like you bummed as hell and just being like desperate and be like, dude, I don't know what's going on. To like getting some of the best waves of your life and just being so stoked, And I was just like, that was worth it. Like just seeing that contrast and seeing that change was so sick and just like so rewarding, it was really cool. It was definitely really cool to see that shift.
I
Yeah.
feel like
So
that's kind of like what you're doing here though. Like that's like the thing that might get missed is like for me, like what you're doing here, like with the community is like rad, and like sharing knowledge and like making training kind of like available. But like for me, like the fact that there's this device that's like a few $100 or whatever, and that like if you look at like from that Hawaii, dude, just on that Hawaii swell would have paid like 10 times that. Like just on those waves, I would have been like, yeah, I mean, I paid so much for that trip anyways, and like just for that swell. But then using it like the past 3 years, like consistently, like I'm like I feel like I don't surf that often at all. Surfing's like snowboarding to me. I have to like go and trek down, but like I can go handle swells. And like I've gotten so many good waves and memories the past 3 years because I just use it twice a week. And I can go down and dude, I don't miss a beat, dude. I can be down in Jersey on like a good day, like shoulder to shoulder with those guys that I know surf a lot more than me, and I can get my waves. And for me, I have like really long sessions because like I drive 2 hours, dude. I'll surf 3, 4 hours, even in winter, like 3, 4 hour sessions, easy. And like I'll get the most waves. And I remember like probably there's like Hawaii was the first one, but like dude, I remember I had to go to California last year a bunch for work to Newport Beach, and I can just show up and rent a board and go to Newport and get like sick waves like on a work trip. Or like I was in Australia over the summer, or we did a Portugal trip with my family where I was getting like amazing waves like on a shortboard. And I don't usually like surf a shortboard anymore, just hanging with guys that I know are like surfing every day and just get it, like, just to be able to be in the mix, man, and like go on a trip and experience the world that way still, to go to Sydney and like catch a swell, to go to Portugal and be able to like continue doing that. Like there's not really a price for that, dude. Like, I don't know what, like, I mean, like for me to be able to continue doing that is like such a gift, and to be able to like feel the confidence. And then for my kids, when they grow up, to be able to like go down and like push them into a couple waves. So I feel like for anyone that's like, loves surfing or wants to get into surfing, for anyone that like maybe doesn't live right by the beach or does and can't get out that much. Cause I got a buddy that had a kid, he lives 10 minutes from the beach in Jersey, hasn't gone out in a year. And when I asked him like, hey, like you want to get out, go out, he's like, I wouldn't even know where to start. And what he means is like, he's not in shape. So for like anyone that just wants to be in the ocean more, that like wants to, get more waves and like have more fun in the ocean and get better waves, like to me, it's a no brainer, dude. Like you could do it at home and you do it for 10, 20 minutes a week. And then you'll just be in the water, like so much more confident, like paddling circles around people. I mean, I like, it sounds silly to say it changed my life, but like it definitely changed my life in this way, and was able to keep my relationship with the ocean and like give me like a ton of happiness for real. So, I mean, from that perspective, like what a gift. So, I hope you sell 1 billion of them, but even if you just had that one that you gave me, I'm pretty happy with that.
Oh man, that stokes me out so much to hear that, that you've gotten so much joy out of it. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of my mission. I was thinking about this the other day, I was thinking it was a weird thing. I was like, my job is like giving people joy. It's like helping people have fun, and that just psychs me out so much. If somebody like goes from not being able to surf to like getting the wave of their life or the wave of their day or the wave of their year or whatever, just because like I will help them train a little bit, that just makes me so stoked, and so it's like just spreading the love. And I'm very happy that I was able to help you continue to have fun and all that. All right, well, we'll work towards wrapping up, but I got 3 last questions for you, but any last words, any last tips, any other words of wisdom? Because I think you've shared a ton, but I really do think some of the best tips come from people that are just like everyday surfers. Like any other nuggets of wisdom that you'd impart on people?
I would just say, like, for me, I think I get it. Like, I think surfing, I came late to surfing, and then I think surfing uses limited resources, which are waves. And then as things, change, and like, swells are harder to come by, especially in the East Coast, and more people want to learn the sport. I've been in the water and I've seen kind of the frustration in people, and as landscapes change and things change. But like, I think like if you're newer, like one of the things that helped me a lot that I just got naturally in Hawaii was sort of like, because I was with the boys and stuff, was sort of like understanding the rules and the etiquette. So I think if you're like newer, like definitely educate yourself like online, like understand um, some of the etiquette and some of the ways to do it. And maybe like, maybe Sands Rockaway, because that place doesn't seem to have any rules, but like most other places have rules. Like maybe I think what's helped me a lot too is because I've been in places too where I'm like, oh, I drove 2 hours. I'm like in the ocean, and I need to get waves. Like I need to get waves. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, the waves aren't as good as I thought. Whatever, whatever. And for me, what's helped is like I have a rule where like I'll just remind myself. I'll say, "Are you in the ocean?" It's like, you're in the ocean. It's like you're not allowed to be angry in the ocean. And I
Hmm.
just kind of think about like you just you just like go for a swim, kind of like. And so like now I put a lot of less expectation on like myself or the swell or like how many waves I need to get or like whatever. So I think if you're a beginner or you're like someone like me who doesn't get to surf out that often, like if you bring kind of like a good energy into the water, like it will, and everyone kind of knows etiquette, like there's a lot of waves to be shared. And I think even though a lot of things are changing and it's like growing in some ways, like everyone can still have a good time in the water. You know what I mean? That's kind of my feeling right now with surfing.
Mhm. Yeah, nice. No, that's great. It's all about the vibe you bring to it. I've actually had sessions where like I'm kind of like, you were talking about, I'll roll up and I'm like, oh, I need my waves. Like I haven't got my wave count, blah, 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 blah. And then like no waves come to me. And then I'll be like, you know what, dude, I'm in the ocean. Like let's just chill. Like, let's just enjoy it. And then the waves start coming to me, and it's like a weird thing. It's like this energy thing. But I've definitely had that experience. All right, 3 last questions for you then. Number one, what is your intention when you ride a wave, when you catch a wave? What goes through your brain?
Yeah. Like I actually think I don't know if someone said this in your podcast before, but like I actually think no intention is good, you know. And I've tried
Yeah.
before to be like, oh, I watched this on YouTube, and like I want to force it, I want to hit this kind of turn or like do whatever, and I always feel like it's very ugly. It's like a very ugly way in my mind to like ride away from me. And I think the beauty of it is like if you're in the right spot and you get on it, you just kind of like see what's there, you know, and that will depend on your skill level. Like I'm still like learning a lot, but nowadays, like I'm on twin fins all the time. And like if I can just get like one good turn or some feeling from it, like, dude, I'm happy, you know? Like what did Spicoli say? Like just, you know, tasty waves and a cool buzz, I'm fine, you know? So something like that.
Nice. All right. If you were, if you had to surf the same wave for the rest of your life, what would it be? You don't have to name a name, but you could also describe it.
Rockaway, let me tell you the exact boulevard, how to get there, and how it
Oh
definitely would
God.
not be Rockaway.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, because like realistically, like my life is on the East Coast. Like I love New Jersey, man. I'm not gonna say where in New Jersey. I love the East Coast. Like so, I'm cool with all the waves we get here. I think they're infrequent, but dude, I think New Jersey is unbelievable. Like you can go out there in winter, man, and on a weekday, and there could be no. I've gotten barreled for like little barrels for like hours by myself out there, man. In like winter, I think there's some magic of the East Coast where like you go other places, it's much better waves, but and much more consistent, but way more crowded. So for me, some little break doesn't have to be barreling where like there's no one else out. I'm happy.
Yeah. Nice. What board would you bring to a deserted island that
Dude,
has
you know what I'm
perfect
on
beach
right
breaks?
now?
Perfect beach
I'm gonna.
breaks. Yeah, perfect bundle.
Well, I don't know. Okay, I don't have a great answer for this, but what I'm on right now, and you interviewed Matt Parker, but dude, I have a 6.0 Twinsman with the fins they made for it, and like, bro, I don't know. I'm like, I think this is the perfect East Coast board for me, for a guy that doesn't get out that often, that wants it in a variety of conditions. That thing has float. That thing can take a drop. It can fit in the wave. I'm taking that.
All right. Sick. Thanks for joining, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully, helped a couple people.